Corona with the ambassador from Sweden, who I hope is here. Ambassador, are you here?
I am.
Very good. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much for joining us. Very kind of you. Always a pleasure to talk to you. We are especially, as you can see, the whole world is especially interested in Sweden. So we are also interested. Everybody is talking about Sweden. You are in the big news. And I have seen about, I think, 5 or 6 videos of your public health officials and various people giving their strategy on Sweden. But let's hear you out first on Sweden, then we'll have I know you have shorter time, so we'll hear your idea, your views on the Corona episode, Swedish experience, European experience, the rest, whatever you can tell us that we can learn from. Our job is to learn. We're not interested in anything else, but trying to catch up with the rest of the world and see what we can learn from there. So, Ambassador, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about this very serious crisis and what it does globally and what it does to us in our respective countries, health-wise, but also socioeconomically, and in sort of it has implications on our entire life and the way we live. I don't think anyone is currently experiencing that it's life as usual. It's a very different and very unexpected development. I think if we look back, maybe, what is it now, 2 months, who could have expected this? We heard about some new virus coming out of China, and I think very few of us understood the implications of that. Some people did. Some of the experts in pandemics did. And we are trying to sort of follow their advice from then on. But they are also not 100% sure what we're actually dealing with here, since it's a completely new virus. I was thinking, I suggest that I talk about the measures taken in Sweden to tackle the pandemic, the more the health aspects, and then also a little bit about tackling the implications of the pandemic, the socioeconomic aspect of it. Then I'm open for questions or comments. It all started on the 1st of February when the government declared that the COVID-19 was to be classified as a disease that constitutes a danger to society. And what this does is that it activates administrative mechanisms and financial resources for extraordinary communicable disease control measures. And the overall objective, obviously, of the government is to reduce the pace of the COVID-19 virus's spread, to flatten the curve, as this new sort of concept that we've learned so much about lately, so that a large number of the population does not fall sick at the same time and overburdens our health system, for example. The considerations they made is that measures must be timely in order to have maximum effect. They need to be weighed against their effect on society and public health in general. They need to be reviewed continuously as the situation develops. And they need to be long-term. And in order for measures to work over time, they need to be understood by the public, accepted by the public, because at the end of the day, it's the general public, the citizens, that will have to do most of the work in order to contain the virus. The Swedish approach is sort of based on two sort of objectives. One is to maximize the capacity of the health services to care for all essential health needs, including the burden of the pandemic. Secondly, to limit the exposure of risk groups that are the elderly, 70 plus, and people with underlying health issues. The concept we've heard so much about recently, herd immunity, that's not the strategy. It's not part of the strategy, since the concept as such is quite unclear, but it could obviously become a byproduct of the strategy as such. Government agencies are in the lead of this work. Swedish population trusts and put a high level of trust in expert agencies, and particularly on preventive health. We have a very strong tradition on that. And Swedes follow agencies' recommendations to a very large degree. And also the implementation of all the measures lies predominantly with regions and municipalities, because they are in our system responsible for carrying out health and social care services. So what measures have been taken then? Well, we have an entry ban for non-EU and non-EEA citizens that are not residing in Sweden and that are not priority categories. Those could be, for example, official visits, experts, people who are needed in healthcare, essential services, societal services. We have, or it can even be diplomats as well. We also have a meeting ban. Not more than 50 persons are allowed to meet at the same place, which has put a complete stop to sports activities, cultural activities, cinemas, and these type of things. Universities and secondary schools are closed. Kindergartens and primary schools are not. They are still open. There is also a complete visit ban on homes for elderly. In addition to this, there are strong recommendations put out to the general public by the National Health Agency, and that is that to the extent possible, all work and studies should be done at home, on distance. There should be social distancing and there should be strong hygiene measures. There should also be limits on local travel and within the country. And if anyone feel any sign of corona-related symptoms, this person should self-isolate. And if they suffer severe symptoms or they deteriorate, they should contact health services immediately, but by phone. They should not seek hospital care immediately. After they have consulted with expertise, and they suspect that this can be a COVID case, they will be picked up by an ambulance, or they will be taken care of some other way. These recommendations are being respected. You can see this. There's a sharp decrease in movements. It's far from business as usual in Sweden, as some media would like to present it. It's very, very quiet in the streets. And there's a high response on the hygiene measures, on social distancing recommendations. And you obviously, we don't know. We can't actually say how it develops, how to say the COVID virus itself, but you can make comparative studies on seasonal flu, for example, which there is no seasonal flu this year, which is an indication that these hygiene measures are actually quite effective. Another sort of feature, you could say, in the Swedish approach is that there has been quite limited testing. And the explanation given by the public health agencies in charge is that before you introduce large-scale testing on immunity or on antibodies, you need to have a certain level of exposure by the public in order actually to identify, sort of, to get a sufficient result, if you wish. Therefore, it has been considered timely to wait. the testing capacity is there, and it's beginning now to be rolled out, particularly in the Stockholm region. That is now currently the region that is suffering the most from the virus and the pandemic. I often get asked, and there's a lot of questions raised about why are not the public schools, the primary schools and the kindergartens closed? And the rationale given by the experts is that there is no clear evidence that these measures will actually contain the pandemic, and it will certainly not do it over time. It can actually have contrary results. It's not necessarily positive to keep children at home. Children are not a risk group either, and you see that actually in the statistics of the cases. We have a minimal amount of children among the identified cases. It's very, very small number. Another aspect is that the way Swedish society functions is that you have a very high level of participation in the workforce. So if you ask children to stay at home, parents have to stay at home. And that would remove a considerable part of the workforce from essential pandemic functions, such as hospital care, police, and other functions in society. And for example, it's been stated that if this was implemented, 20% of the workforce in the healthcare system would have to stay at home to take care of their children, because you don't want the risk group, the elderly, the grandparents, to take care of them. That would be counterproductive. So that's one aspect that has been raised quite a bit. So, and how are we doing? Currently, I studied the statistics this morning, and we have 20,000 identified cases. Testing is only done on suspected cases. We have 2,300 dead. And it's the Stockholm region that is affected. This is very much an urban phenomenon at the moment. It's very much Stockholm and the surrounding region. The development is currently flattening. There seems to be at least a positive, careful optimism that the number of cases are leveling out, and hopefully over time, but this we don't know, we will see a reduction. And when it comes to the healthcare system, they are struggling. They are really struggling, and there's a lot of voluntary resources put in. I think you have seen the news about our Princess Sofia, who has joined as a volunteer, but there are so many more. We have a large number of the employees of SAS Airlines have taken this 3-day course, and they are working as support staff in the healthcare, doing tasks that are not the most qualified that they can do with some basic. So we have never reached more than 80% of the care capacity for intensive care so far, which is reassuring. And then the implications of the pandemic. Obviously, this has the pandemic has major effects on the economy in Sweden, obviously, and globally. And there's been, I think we count 5 revised state budgets in the last 2 months to release funds for various measures to tackle this. And the first thing that was done was obviously a set of measures to add funding and resources to the efforts in reducing the spread of the virus itself. Regions and municipalities are currently being provided additional funding for all their expenses they have for the tackling the outbreak itself. Also, the relevant healthcare and other government agencies are offered additional funding. And immediately, since there was a very strong signal that from the public agencies that people should work at home, and they should, at the first suspicion of deteriorating health, stay at home, the sick pay standard deduction was suspended. We actually have, if you call in sick in Sweden, the first day on leave will be unpaid, and the rest will be covered. That provision has been reduced. You will be fully paid all the time, and you will not need at this moment any medical certificate to prove this. And that is also to take off that bureaucratic burden from the healthcare system itself. You don't want at this point doctors to write medical certificates. Second, obviously, jobs and businesses. Small and medium-sized companies are seriously affected, particularly in the service sector, because people are not using them as much as before. I think maybe the only winner in this would be home entertainment and home deliveries of food, but very rare, very few sectors. We see a diminishing of the economy and the economic activity, and there is an all-time high in short-term layoffs in the industry. And even though the industry could work under the current, there are other shortages, such as supplies. You have all these supply chains not disrupted. One example is the Scania truck industry that in theory could work, but they don't get the components from overseas. So it stops them from working. There are, the support is simply state compensation for the layoffs. You have a lot of people who are laid off part-time, so they might work 3 days a week, and then for the remaining 2 days they get compensated by the state, so they don't lose too much of their income. There is also temporary suspensions of various employers' social security contributions, and the same for self-employed. And there is also I mentioned the general salary contribution for staff with a reduced work. We see rising unemployment. We are passing 10% at the moment. So additional funding has been provided for the Swedish public employment services to help people find other job opportunities. Also to take part in various programs in order to do training or be involved in support and matching services of various kinds in order to prepare themselves for new jobs and other careers. There's also funding put into the university and the education system at various levels to increase their capacity, so that if you are unemployed, you could be offered training to increase your qualifications, or even do training for, let's say, a second career. And finally, the government has declared that as soon as the pandemic will permit, they will use other fiscal policy measures to stimulate a rapid recovery for businesses and industry in order for them to return to full capacity as soon as possible. So I think I stop there.
Great, thank you, Master. Very useful summary, very interesting summary. So in short, what's happening as we expected, really, is the fact that it's a high trust society, the fact that it's a thoughtful society, the fact it's a depoliticized society, a lot of technical and detailed decisions have been taken that the rest of the world is struggling with. Let me quickly ask you two questions before I sort of put it to the audience. Is there any thinking, I know it's speculation, but it's worth getting your views on this. Is there any thinking on how long you in Sweden and Europe, you think that this is going to last, and what are you preparing for? Are you preparing for 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever? I mean, I'm just looking for some kind of a... The second question, which is also very important, is, I mean, everybody's speculating on this. And again, I invite your speculation on this. We all expect the world is going to change dramatically because of this. So what kind of trends, I mean, here I'm asking really to speculate a little, what kind of trends do you think, what should we prepare ourselves? We're all, scrambling for answers. So what can you tell us on these two speculative questions? Since I've seen you as an intellect, I respect your intellect, I've talked to you before. Just give us your speculations on this. Food for thought.
I start with the first one because that was also difficult, but not as difficult as the second one. But how long will this last? We don't know, do we? The government has been very, very clear, and the Prime Minister has been very clear that we need to think in terms of months, not weeks. And a lot of the planning going on is aiming at towards the end of the year, that the entire year would be affected by this. To an increasing or a lesser degree, but this will follow, and it will have implications for society for a long time. And also, we might see waves of the pandemic. We might see a recovery, and then the pandemic growing sort of in impact later on. Again, we don't know. So from the very, very start, the government and the expert agencies have said that this must be a long-term sort of program and set of measures. It must be measures that we can hold for a long time, and that people are willing to accept and respect for a long time. And in Sweden we have summer coming, and those of you who have been to Sweden knows that life in Sweden changes from being very much an indoor sort of life to an outdoor. The moment we see the sun and the flowers are coming out and it starts getting green, we wish to be active and outdoors. And this is a challenge to obviously meet the spring, but to do it in this very conscious way, still maintaining the social distancing and so on. So that's on the first one. Will the world change? Yes, I think we've already started changing. The fact that we're meeting on Zoom, for example, I think we're going to see how these types of media is going to become mainstream. I also think we're going to see vast changes. I'm an economist, and I'm quite interested in how this affects industry and economic life. And I think we're going to see all industry look at supply chains. They're going to look at their business model, and they are going to try to reduce risks to their sort of their business due to problems with the logistics and problems in terms of communication. And this is also what our Swedish companies in Pakistan is telling us, that these are on these two aspects, that's where they suffer, logistics and communications. And so let's see what that brings. The Swedish government has put in place a task force that is looking at this because we believe that we will see far more of high-tech, IT-based solutions. We will see much more. This will be an opportunity for smart solutions, even a push for artificial intelligence solutions. That whole new generations of solutions, and Sweden wish to be in the forefront of that, because we are sitting on quite a lot of competence in this area, and we want to also see if there are opportunities for us in that regard.
Thank you, thank you. Let me bring in my colleagues. Any questions, folks? Any comments? Please go ahead, take your turn. I'll see if there are anybody wants to. I don't see any raised hands, but nevertheless, whoever wants to.
I don't know.
Sorry, system. Who is this?
It's Manzoor, and I was.
Manzoor Sahab, go ahead. Manzoor Sahab, go
okay.
ahead.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think very good explanation. And my question is that I think Sweden and Japan and South Korea, there were some differences, but more or less similar policies. And they didn't, the lockdown, as some other countries have done, they are slightly different. You see any similarities or, between the approaches followed by the three countries?
You said Sweden, South Korea, and
Japan.
Well, I'm not an epidemiologist. It's a very hard question to answer, and I don't know what my opinion is worth. I don't know. I think I have no idea. I don't know. I've been so focused on what we need to do. I'm also part of this government system. I haven't followed Japan. I don't know what they did actually.
Okay, no problem.
I think actually, I think, I mean, a reflection though is that I think it's very important for each country to find its own approach. Approach based on its own strengths and weaknesses and culture and other features. You know, what works, because at the end of the day, it's not putting compare measure to measure. It's about having an impact. You want to change people's behavior in a way that is reducing the spread of the virus and protecting them from and the society and individuals from the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic. That's what you want to do. And then there's also a balance, obviously, with other concerns. We see worldwide, and that's also widely reported, that the implications of the pandemic is that you have an increase in other health issues. You have mental health issues. You have a sharp increase of domestic violence, for example. You see women and children being exposed to that primarily, and you also see people being very frustrated due to unemployment, lack of income, and so on. So there's a wide range of sort of concerns of this kind. I think I think comparing is difficult. I think it's each and every country finding its own.
Great, thank you. Anybody else, folks?
Yeah, right, sir.
Ji, boliye. Amir?
Yeah, Ambassador, thank you very much for a very interesting discourse. I have invited one of our friends who's an ambassador to The Hague as well, because it's very critical of Sweden's approach. I have two questions for you. I heard you say that it is by and large now an urban phenomena. I mean, could you just elaborate where that statistic comes from? The second thing is, you know, Sweden has a lot of logistics investments in Pakistan, and as you said very rightly, that you would like to move to your natural advantage, which is not only just logistics and the shipping side. So my question to you is, do you see now a push or a sudden change towards self-driven logistics? I mean, I mean to ask, will you now allow trucks from Mercedes, which are being experimenting, or Volvo around Europe, to start doing that to your ports? I mean, that is a very critical question, because then with that leap, really, I have other views to tell Dr. Nadeem about how far back we will be in Pakistan if that happens. But anyhow, I just read 2 questions. Thank you.
It's sort of your voice was broken, and the reception is not perfect. I think your first question was on that I mentioned that it was this was mainly a urban phenomenon at the moment, and you asked me to elaborate on this. Data, yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, correct. Because I mean, what data got you to say that, even if subconsciously? Because you very clearly stated that this is more or less an urban phenomenon.
Yes, it's very clear. It's I don't have the numbers, but I think we have more than 70% of the identified cases in the Stockholm region. And we have a large part of the country with very much less cases. If you go to the Swedish Healthcare Agency's website, you can see there's a Sweden map, and the Stockholm region is dark green, and the rest of the country is light green or far lighter green. It's and it's picking up. It's also picking up now in the Gothenburg area, and I think we see this globally, that population density plays a role in I think I've seen this also in the WHO reporting, that it's very much an urban phenomenon. And I also believe that I've seen that on the reporting for Pakistan, that we see a similar type of trends. On the second one, it was a bit on the logistics and Pakistan and what that could entail. Is that correct?
No, what I was wondering to ask is that, you know, Sweden is very much has a lot of logistics investments in Pakistan, including, for example, the Alhamd container terminal, etc. My question to you is that, as you said, you're going to move to more smart systems. So there's been this push about driverless or self-driven logistics, for example, starting with trucks. Do you see that technology really enough there in terms of development? Because Sweden does lead on these, especially in terms of, I know, port systems, etc. So do you think that that's going to be now rather than later? I mean, because of COVID?
I think, I don't know if it's the driverless trucks or what systems, but I do think we're going to see far more investment in automatization of production, of logistics, and so on. Clearly, I think this is one of the conclusions that the industry management throughout is drawing at this point. This is one way of trying to sort of protect their production from this type of sort of how should you say, disturbance. It sounds a bit to sort of, it's not strong enough, but there you go. I mean, we see that already. It's maybe been more driven by costs, but even more so now. I don't know if we are going to roll out the driverless trucks in Pakistan as a first measure, but I think we're going to see an industry, and that could be a concern for Pakistan. Pakistan needs to reflect on that, because it means that a lot of job opportunities will be lost. And I think when we see automatization, it's primarily the more low-skilled type of tasks that will be sort of taken over by machines. And with the demographic development of Pakistan, that needs to be somehow tackled. That could be one challenge ahead, actually.
Sorry, Ambassador, I said, do you have time to take one last question?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, folks. Anybody? Anybody? General Saab, anybody? Well, okay. If not, Ambassador, then let me just ask you a simple question. I mean, not simple, but I think very pertinent question for the time. What has the process of decision-making been in Switzerland? I heard one of your experts talking at the Cato Institute, and he was giving very interesting note on that how Swedish system is set up to depoliticize decision-making and why this led to this decision. So I just want to understand the process of decision. And when you say you've set up a task force for the future, what are the terms of reference of that task force and how is it going to report? Again, this is germane for us because we set up task forces and we don't know where they go. So with that background, I'm just asking you, how is the Swedish decision taking? What do you mean by a task force? What are its terms of reference?
What is quite unique about Sweden is that we have an administrative system where the government offices are quite small. The government offices is tasked to develop policy and to assure that policy is being implemented. And to do that, they have the rest of the public administration, and that is a range of government agencies. Those government agencies are expert agencies. They are independent. They you govern them through annual instructions and through budgets by providing them resources. But we do not have minister rule in Sweden. A minister cannot interfere and tell, for example, not even now during the pandemic, the public health authorities what to do. That gives, I think that's a big difference to, let's say, UK, for example, that has a very clear minister rule type system where a minister has to be ready to answer any question, even in detail, on what's going on his or her watch. This has been debated because as people realized how big this pandemic was and what repercussions it had, it said that isn't the political level shying away from its responsibility now? Shouldn't the Prime Minister and the minister step up and tell agencies what to do? And they have actually responded that they do have the political responsibility, but the way Sweden is governed is through this system where the expert agencies are tasked to implement. And they've also been very, very clear that no measures will be introduced that are not evidence-based, that cannot in some way, in a convincing way, have an impact on the virus. There will not be symbolic sort of measures taken. And this has been an ongoing debate. How far can you let the experts run this? However, I mean, I think we've seen, and epidemiology is it's difficult, and this particularly when you're facing a totally new enemy and virus, that you are more in the hands of experts as ever before. So I think this is what has been debated, and that this could possibly be what this person had sort of reflected on. And that's it's an old system. It's from the 17th century. We had the same system, and the same goes for the level of decentralization. I mentioned that regions and municipalities are responsible for implementing health services, social care services, and even the primary and secondary schooling. So they are in charge of the implementation of actions, but they do it obviously under the existing legislative framework and the regulations in place. And they are responsible. They answer to the government, and there are certain sort of sanctions and measures if something should not be done correctly, or if it's insufficient.
Good. And the task force, Ambassador?
The task force, that's policy actually. That's policy level. So that's with the government officers, and that's a task force where they put together a joint team from various relevant ministries to trying to look into the crystal ball and try to in a more structured way discuss with civil society, with representatives of the industry and the economy as a whole, how what sort of conclusions they draw and what it is they see coming. Coming back to your initial question on how the world will change, and then try not only looking at the short-term implications, because they are quite negative, obviously, but is there anything we can build on as the world is coming out of this pandemic? Are there any opportunities for Swedish industry, Swedish innovation, Swedish know-how? And we believe it is, that there are some. And I think lots of countries are doing this at the moment, because that's one way of trying to get out of this and recover the economy quickly. And
Will the report of this task force be available publicly or not?
I don't know this. It's a very recent. I think it was set up just a few weeks ago. So, but it's an attempt not just to it's an attempt to also look at a little bit more on the long term, and not get absorbed in the immediate. You could easily be swallowed by day-to-day issues, obviously.
Yeah. Well, if you have anything from this, any report from this task force, we'd be very happy to study that, because I think the real meat right now is trying to figure out where we're going, what's going to happen. Yes, we've had two very tough months. I haven't stepped out of the house. I haven't even sat in a car for 2 months. I haven't even visited anybody. I've been alone. I've been only interacting with people on video. And I think lots of us are doing that. So we had difficult 2 months, but we hope it won't last till the end of the year, as you said. Although by the look of things, it might.
The Swedish National Health Agency makes a point saying that the outdoors is not dangerous. It's social distancing doesn't mean that you're not supposed to go outside. Go for a walk. They encourage people to go outside, because you need that for your general health. So please do, but then stay. I think they say 2 meters away from people in the city.
So I'm totally practicing that, but at the same time, I tell you, if it lasts till the end of the year, I'm going to have psychological problems. So I have to worry about that too. So Ambassador, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to interact with you. Thanks for giving us time.
Thank you.
We look forward to interacting with you more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All the best, Ambassador. Thank you. Bye-bye.